Hello, hi, welcome to and or back to the Jet Rail podcast. I am your host, Jill Treese, and this episode we are going to try not to get a headache. Actually, this episode we are going to be talking about liberty and what that means, what it means to you, what it means to me, what it means in general, and some advantages and disadvantages of using liberty training. So without further ado, let's get into it. Aw, you know what that means. We're back to not being aggressive. So I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone who listened to and shared the last podcast episode. I have never had a reaction like that to an episode before, and you guys, that meant the absolute world to me. I loved seeing everything on you guys' Instagram stories, sharing it, and saying that it was super important, and I love it. Also got a lot of messages from you guys saying how impactful it was and how much it helped reshape the way that you consider horses and how they interact with one another. And I am so happy to have played a role in that, and even more happy that there are people out there that are open to accepting new information instead of just being defensive and writing me off and telling me I'm stupid. I thoroughly appreciate those of you who shared your stories with me and said everything that you did about the last episode. That absolutely just made my day and really encouraged me to keep talking about it, because you guys think it's really important, and I thought it was really important too, but I didn't realize how impactful it was going to be. So I'm working on some more stuff, hopefully going to have a YouTube video up on it soon, and I'm working on a blog post right now that I think is going to be pretty awesome. I am really happy with how it's going so far, but it's taking me a really long time to write because I talked for 3.5 hours about it, I think. So you can imagine how writing about it is going. So yeah, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you guys, and I'm sure your horses thank you as well. And I just am so proud of this generation and this sect of horses and horse people, because I think that we are really the stepping stone from using traditional force-based methods to kinder training, be it negative reinforcement or positive reinforcement, however you train. I think that this generation is going to be the one to lead the way to more ethical training and listening to science and doing your own research and putting the horse first instead of putting what your trainer says first. It's okay to check your sources and make sure that it is what you believe in, not just what you're told. So with that said, I think that we should jump into this hot topic. If you would like to support me and the horses, you can check us out on Patreon. That's patreon.com/JetRailPodcast. And you can sign up at whatever tier best suits you, $5 to $35. And you can cancel at any time. And you can join us on live monthly Q&As and all that good stuff. And you can also get to ask me questions that I'll answer on the podcast or privately, depending on what tier you are, and other benefits. So please check out the Patreon. And if you can't help, that is A-okay. Just keep on listening to these podcasts. You're doing enough. Okay? So without further ado, let us get into the topic. Today's topic, you can tell, is the title, What's Liberty? Good golly, Miss Molly, what is that? I have to say, I have filmed this intro 3 times, so lower your expectations, because this episode is not going well so far. I don't know why, I just feel so, not on top of it. I've been staring at my computer for hours today. I keep taking breaks to, try and reset, but it is being difficult. So forgive me if it is a little bit all over the place, more so than usual. But I am working on that blog post that I mentioned just a second ago, and I've spent hours on it today, and then I also spent hours redesigning my website. And if you want to check it out as it is right now, it's JETEquiTheory.com. You can look into it and see all the hard work that I've done and read my story and Zoe's story and all that good stuff. But yeah, so anyway, continuing on being off topic, I'm going to get back to topic. So liberty training, that is a pretty hot topic in the horse world, and there's no denying it. Everybody is just somehow enchanted with Liberty. You know, when you see pictures under like the Liberty hashtag on Instagram, for instance, you think about like horses and girls in beautiful flowing white dresses, and they're running around in a field together, and the horse has its ears perked, and there might as well be rainbows and fairies dancing around them. It's just magical, and it looks just like euphoric. It looks like the best thing in the entire world. But I'm here to tell you, that ain't it, you know? We'll get to why in a moment. But I first found Liberty. Okay, my cats are fighting. Apologies. I first found Liberty from Heartland and Mosey Truitt on Instagram. And, you know, I mean, I guess it's kind of just like a stereotype in horse movies that, like, you know, the abused horse or the, you know, a girl, what do you call it? Like the angsty teen girl or whatever. They come together and then they form this magical bond. She can ride the horse and nobody else can, et cetera, et cetera. Or like the Black Stallion, for instance. Like all of those wonderful things, you just get to dance and communicate with the horse. You don't need anything. Just your bond. And that led to some really awful things for me. Hey, can you guys stop fighting, please? I'm trying to record a podcast. You're being rather noisy. Archie, come here. Okay. Anyway, so led to some not so great things for me because I thought that Liberty just was reliant on your bond, and I was like, I've got a horse that I love a lot, and that probably means I've got a solid bond with him. And I can do that. So when I had Bo, who was the gelding that I had before Zoe, I thought that I could just, like, get him to do tricks. And because Mosey Truitt on Instagram, I followed her and looked at the stuff that she did, as well as Lacey Jameson, who has passed on now, but she was one of my big inspirations. And there were a lot of people doing things of that nature at the time, like standing on their horses' backs with no tack on. That was a big thing that Lacey always did. And then Mosey always had her horses standing on pedestals and rearing and seeming to dance with her and all that good stuff. And I was like, I want to do that so bad. And so obviously there are no Liberty trainers in my area. It's kind of a niche thing, but I really wanted to do it, and so I just looked at their pictures, and I was like, yeah, okay, I got it. It's not how that works. So when I had Bo, he had a keratoma. See what I'm talking about? I just keep pausing. Like, I know where I'm going, and I'm like lagging today. I apologize. Anyway, Bo had a keratoma, and that required surgery, and then he was out for 8 months. I think about 4 to 6 of those were spent on stall rest, and so when I would get him out to, like, go for a walk and things like that, I wanted to do something else with him, which is coincidentally a very similar situation that got me into positive reinforcement, but I'll get into that later. But he... I would do, like, try to bow with him, and if you look on, I think it's probably on Jill_Heartthrob having 1T, it's my old Instagram account. I got locked out of it at, like, 7K, and that's when I started Jill and Bo, which then became Jet Eventing, which is now JETEquiTheory. But, I would try to teach him to bow, but he wouldn't step back with his back feet, so he would just, like, stand exactly where he was and bend one leg back. And so he was just, like, very cramped, and he just looked like he was trying to, like, make a rainbow, and it was really not what we were shooting for. And I was so proud of it, and I always posted it online and whatever, and, like, oh, God, I'm tired apparently, too. Like, 8 p.m. I never record this early, and I'm so tired. I've recorded this podcast at, like, 3 a.m. before, and now I'm, like, yawning. Apologies. I'm just going to keep apologizing in this episode. I don't know. I'm feeling very self-conscious about where my brain is at. Anyway. So, I tried and failed miserably to teach him tricks, and they look awful. And there are also some videos on my YouTube about it, and I also tried to ride him bridleless at Liberty, which actually ended up in this horrible circumstance. To this day, it is one of the worst things that has ever happened to me. I tried to first ride him bridleless with a piece of paracord that I had braided together, and I just, like, took him into this little pasture and hopped on him and asked him to trot, which turned into canter, and very quickly he found the tree at the end of the arena that its branches were too low. So if he would canter under it, I would have to jump off. But it was around a corner. Oh my God. I don't know what is going on with me tonight. I just can't today. I'm so sorry. Anyway, when he had to make the turn before the tree, he would slow down, so I could jump off. So the problem was that there was a tree in that arena, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this in this arena anymore. So one day, nobody was at the barn, and I was like, okay, good. I can try this without embarrassing myself. So, I'm in shorts and a tank top and tennis shoes, and I was like, I'm going to take him to the round pen. So I went down to the round pen and hopped on him, and I had on this bareback pad, and it was green with a nylon strap across the back that would connect to the girth. And so I take him in the arena, and I have his halter on, and I hop on him bareback and sit on this bareback pad. And it's got this nylon strap, right? Remember that? And I'm in shorts. If you've ever experienced this, you know where I'm going. So I, start riding him in the halter, and it's fine. So then I just go ahead and take the halter off, and I cannot remember if I just grabbed onto his mane or if I had that neck rope. I really don't remember which way I did it, but either way, I could not get him to slow down. He started cantering, and he was just lapping and lapping and lapping and lapping and lapping and lapping. Like, he just would not stop. And I had on shorts, and this nylon rubbed me until I had like a 3rd-degree burn. Like, do you know how hard you have to rub your skin against something for it to burn off? That's what happened. It just rubbed the entire inside of my knee pit raw. Just my knee pits on both legs were completely rubbed raw. And I am he's cantering around, and I am bawling my eyes out because it's a circular arena, and he's panicking, and I can't get him to slow down. So he just keeps going in circles. And I was like, he has to slow down eventually. And I thought about bailing, but he was going so fast, and it was such a tight arena that in the time that I had to contemplate this, I was like, he's going too fast. If I jump off, he might kick me, or I'm definitely going to break a leg or a wrist or something, and I would rather just burn my legs off than risk one of those things happening. So I just rode it out until I either grabbed really high up on his mane, or I slung the neck rope up into his throat latch and just yanked as hard as I could, which, bless him for not attacking me. But he eventually half halted when I did that, and I bailed. I just jumped off immediately, and I was just crying and kissing the ground. I was so happy to not be stuck on his back with my legs burning off. So anyway, then I brought him out of the arena and put him away, and was so embarrassed for the next week because, obviously I had to tell my trainer and everybody why I wasn't going to be in lessons, that I had strangely just rubbed off all the skin off the back of my knee, and they were like, how did you do that? And it's just not one of my brighter moments, but that is the problem. And I'm not saying that Liberty is all to blame for that. Obviously I was a young naive child, but it perpetuates this I guess, fallacy or fantasy. Fantasy is probably more accurate. It's fantasy that you can just do whatever with your horse if you just believe. It's not a fairy in Neverland, my dude. That is not how that works. So this is my point. Liberty, usually, the way people think of it is this connection with your horse. You want to do Liberty training out in the field where you're just running around and there is nothing on the horse and it's just magical. And everybody wants to learn how to do that because it's just your childhood dream to have a horse that wants to be with you, which is so strange because that's what everybody wants, and we do the exact opposite. We make the horse not enjoy being with us in most cases, and it takes a hot second of untraining for you to figure out how to do that in most cases. Some people definitely start out in better ways, but that's where I think that we have this problem in traditional training. And I hope that, that will start to change. I have a lot of faith in the upcoming generation, and even some of the generations that have been at it for years. I always get emails. The best emails I think that I get are from trainers that are like, I've started incorporating this into my lesson program, and I'm like, oh my God, you rock. So anyway, it's odd to me that people want so badly to have this connection with their horses where they can work with them with no ropes and equipment in a big open space, and their horse wants to stay with them, but the way they train is by teaching the horse that bad things happen around the human. You know, they get hit or kicked or spurred or whipped, and I'm not saying that all of those things are necessarily bad all the time, but generally the way they're used in traditional training is too much and painful, and you can spin it however you would like, but if it is painful, the horse is probably not enjoying it. So anyway, that's liberty. Liberty is that ethereal idea that you see in like Heartland, the TV show, and it is just not, that ain't it, Chief. What liberty means to me is the horse is at liberty. You're not doing liberty with your horse. You are working with your horse at liberty. You're doing positive reinforcement at liberty. You're doing negative reinforcement at liberty. You can, liberty is not the method. It's kind of like the setting. So like when you ride, normally you have on tack and equipment. When you lunge your horse, you have on a lunge line. With liberty, you just don't have anything on the horse, but you're still using the same training principles, if that makes sense. So to me, liberty just means the horse is free to leave or free to stay. And I feel like it's important to point out that just because the horse doesn't have any tack or equipment on him, it does not necessarily mean the horse is at liberty. Because, like I said, to me, liberty means the horse has a choice. He can either choose to stay with you or to leave you. And if you are in a teeny tiny, 20 to 30 meter round pen, and, the horse is at the perimeter of the round pen, he does not really have a choice whether he wants to be with you or not, because he's stuck right next to you. Especially if you're working with like join up, like we talked about in the last episode, the horse doesn't have a whole lot of choice. The choice he does have is to either continue to be afraid and sprinting for his life around the perimeter of the arena, or standing next to you and following whatever you do so that he doesn't get scared. That's not really a choice. That's just picking from two evils with both bad consequences. So to me, a choice is the ability to do two things that you would like to do. You get to pick between the two. And so a scenario where I would say that the horse has choice is, say, with Zoe. When I work with her out in her pasture, she has access to hay and grass and water and her pasture mate, and she chooses to come over to me and work with me. And the treats that I'm using, beware, this is going to send me on a tangent. The treats that I'm using are called alfalfa pellets or hay pellets. So they're not that much more salient than hay. And all salient really means is like how valuable or reinforcing or tasty. So they're not that much higher up than hay is. And so what that means is Zoe can either pick between eating the hay that's just hanging available on her, like on the fence in the hay bag, or she can choose to work with me and work for the reward. And this is called contra freeloading, and this happens with all sorts of different species of animals, that they would rather work for the food than just get it for free. Why? Because it's enriching. And contra freeloading is the entire reason we can do things at liberty, because the horse is given a choice. Now, in the circumstance where the horse might feel that he doesn't have a choice is if you have if you're working with a really, really sugary, powerful, salient treat, then the horse doesn't really have a choice because he's not choosing between the same thing in, a different environment, I guess. So it's not choosing hay from a bag or from your treat pouch, but it's choosing between hay and a really, really sugary, tasty treat. That's not really a choice. Obviously, there is one more fun, enjoyable answer or whatever. So you have to be aware of that you're not forcing the horse to make a choice, be it through being scary or pain inflicting, or that you're withholding something that's really, really good to the horse. With Zoe, when I work with her, she can leave at any time to go eat grass or go eat hay, and sometimes she does. And the great thing about that is that she, like when she does leave, it's not necessarily a bad thing to me. And this is really, really important for the young horses that I work with as well, because the babies, they don't have as long and mature of an attention span as, say, Zoe does. Zoe, I know you're supposed to keep sessions rather short, but I always lose track of time with her because she just wants to keep going, and she never seems to like start missing until we hit about like 25 minutes, and then she starts getting a little like mentally fatigued, and so do I. But for that 25 minutes, it is sole focus on what we're doing, and she is just a powerhouse at it. But the baby horses, you got about 5 to 10, maybe 10. And that's like really pushing it. And if it's something that doesn't require a whole lot of brain power, like just standing while I brush your mane or something. So, that is what I want to point out, that it's really great when your horse does leave. And you might be like, Jill, what the heck? That is the worst thing in the world. How can you train if your horse leaves all the time? It's an indication to you. It is kind of like a check engine light, if you will. If you're working with your horse and they would rather walk away from you, it probably means that you're either not entertaining or enriching enough for them, or they're confused and they're getting frustrated, which I much prefer a horse that will walk away when they get frustrated with you rather than, start acting out aggressively, which is what I think is beautiful about liberty training, is when you don't have any tether to your horse and they're free to come and go as they please, they tend to be a lot less aggressive and violent. And now I will say that Mac, when we first got him, it was my RRP prospect. He is the only horse that I've ever had so far that got quote-unquote aggressive at liberty, but I think it comes from his history, and he wasn't quite trusting of me yet, and I just kind of walked up to him, and I didn't see any signs that indicated something was going to happen, but for some reason he just pawed out, and he could have been feeling fresh, but he just like did this really big paw out motion. I was like, ah! But then he never did it again. So I think but then also you're not stuck. You're not tethered to the horse. So you're not going to shake the lead rope at it and tell it to get out of your space and mind its manners and blah, blah, blah. You can just move away from the horse, and the horse can do the same for you. If he's uncomfortable by your presence or something that you're doing, the horse can just leave. And I love that because, like I said, it does tend to decrease aggression and their frustration levels, because you don't have this thing that's keeping you in super close proximity. And so when your horse is confused or frustrated or bored or not liking what you're doing, he can just leave. And like Lexi, our 3-year-old that I'm working with, she is terrified to death of needles. And so I don't think that the answer to fixing that is tying her up and trying to solve that problem, because she's just going to pull. It's going to make her more anxious and exacerbate the situation. So what I'm doing is I am having her learn to just stand and hang out at liberty. And that is going to be really beneficial when we start working on desensitizing to having her neck touched, and then having an object near her neck, and then this object near her neck, and then another object near her neck, and then a syringe near her neck, and then, something that maybe pokes her a little bit, but not like a needle poke, like a finger, like something really big and blunt. And then gradually we work up to the needle. But today I was giving her a haircut, and because her mane was really long and tangly, and I was like, it's way too hot. So I just cut her mane, and I accidentally poked her with the scissors. I think she like swatted a fly or something, and she like moved her neck into the scissors, and it poked her, and her eyes got kind of wide, and then she just walked away from me. Now, this little filly, I have seen so many different types of reactions out of her, because she is terrified to death of needles. And that was the most calm and quiet response. And she just said, I would like to not be here now. and she just left. And it wasn't an explosion. She didn't paw out at me. She didn't try to bite me. She didn't pin her ears. She didn't do anything aggressive. She was just like, nope. And she just walked away because she knew she could. And I think that is a huge difference. And I'm not saying that when you, work with your horse not at liberty, when you have a lead rope or a halter, that it's dangerous or bad, or you're inherently stressing your horse out or making them feel trapped or more likely to be aggressive. But I think in certain circumstances, especially with horses like Lexi, when you're working with something that makes them uncomfortable, they really need to have the option to leave. Because I think the worst thing you can do to a horse is try and flood them and wait until they just give up, and wait until you send them into learned helplessness and they learn that they don't have a choice. That is the complete opposite of liberty. And that's often what happens with join up. You can do liberty, quote unquote liberty, with, where the horse has no tack on them and still use negative reinforcement and, some positive punishment, as long as you can make the horse, inflict something onto the horse that it doesn't like, be it fear or pain. Like a lot of people do this with like tarps or plastic baggies or flags or big bouncy balls, and they just bounce it on the horse until it stops running, And that is an example of flooding, and it is extremely stressful for the horse to endure. And beyond that, you're teaching the horse that it can't get away from scary things, that it just needs to submit, which is an anthropomorphic word to use, but that it just needs to give up. It needs to stop running and just let the scary thing eat it. And that's not really something that you want to teach a prey animal, just throwing that out there. So I just think it's really detrimental to the horse. It dampens their spirit, and it teaches them that no matter what they do, you're always going to do whatever you would like, whether it scares them or hurts them or whatever. And that is just not the way that I would like to train my animals, and I should hope it's not the way that anybody else wants to, but I see it happen way too often. Of course, it's justified and painted in a prettier picture with nice words like teaching and learning. The horse is licking and chewing because he's learning. Nope, coming down from his sympathetic nervous system. Cool. It's all semantics, I guess, but the horse doesn't think so. So, anyway, to my point, with Lexi, I think that situation would have gone very differently if I had her tied up and then just kept poking her with the scissors until she finally either killed me or gave up and learned that I'm just going to do whatever I would like to do to her, and she has no say. And that is, I think, not the goal of training. And I think it is important for the horse to have a choice. Some people might see that aspect of liberty as a disadvantage because it can be annoying and inconvenient when you're trying to get somewhere with your horse and they keep leaving. But to me, as frustrating and difficult as it is sometimes to recognize, it's a sign that the horse is not getting it. And the reason that the horse is not getting it is not the horse's fault. It's your fault. And I hate to say that because it's very blamey. But at the same time, you're the one that wants to train this animal. You're the one that brought it into your world and your human life. And I think that's an amazing thing that people do, because I think we should own horses so that they don't die and don't go extinct and all of that good stuff. But at the same time, you have to teach them. And if the horse isn't learning, it is your fault. If you have, if you have a child, or you are a child and you go to school and your parents send you there to learn algebra and your teacher is teaching you geometry, it's still math. It's in the right direction. They're teaching you something, but you're not getting it. And, it's not the right thing, or it doesn't make sense to you. Then your parents are going to be like, hey, teacher, why aren't you teaching my child what they're supposed to be learning? It is not the child's fault that they're not learning it. It's, it's on the responsibility is primarily on the teacher. And obviously it's not, whatever. I'm not qualifying every statement that I make. But in training, at least, if you want to make your horse do things, like jumping or riding, it is your responsibility to teach them how to do those things. You cannot just expect them to because bond and they love you, or because they're a horse and they're supposed to, or because they have this history and they know better. Those things are all the things that I talked about in the previous episodes and debunked the reasons why that should not be used in training. You guys know this, but it is just, that ain't it, Chief. You got to teach the horse. And I think liberty is a fantastic way to do that, especially for situations where the horse is likely to leave. Like with Lexi and the scissors versus needle situation. She's highly likely to walk away from me in that situation. And I know that going into it, and that's why I did not tie her up, because I didn't want to stress her out even more. I want her to know that she can leave, and then that is the only way that you can get a true yes. So this is a concept that Mosey Truitt, who actually has the brand Liberty Horsemanship training. She has a website and online courses and all that good stuff, which I've actually taken her online course and I highly recommend it. It's called The Liberated Horse. So she, ow, oh God, everything is so bad. Anyway, she did a podcast episode. I forget which one it was. It was one of the earlier ones. And she was talking about how if you don't allow your horse the choice and the option to truly say no, to walk away from you and be like, I don't want to do this, or I'm not interested right now, or you're not making any sense. If you don't give the horse that option, you never get a genuine yes. And that's where we start talking about consent in training. And consent, I 100% agree with the concept that you should give the horse the option to say no so that they can truly say yes, and that is consent. But that word, for some reason, is a hang-up for me, and I think that it will be a hang-up for a lot of people. I don't know what other word you could call that, but I think that really makes people think that it's kind of like a tree huggery, witchy, voodoo, magic-y, not actual training thing. Because when I first heard people talk about consent-based training, I was like, okay, I don't need a horse consenting for me to get on its, okay, yeah, right. It sounds a little anthropomorphic, but it's not, because I agree with the concept. I don't know why I just have a hang up on that word, and maybe it's just me, but I feel like a lot of people that come from a traditional background are going to be like, consent with a horse? But I'm here to tell you, if you give your horse the option to say no, you do not restrict them and force them to stay with you when you start training them. And especially when you first start positive reinforcement, they're going to leave all the time. They're going to, see if you're serious about letting them have a choice. And also, positive reinforcement is a totally new thing for a lot of horses, so it can be really mentally taxing. So sometimes they just get fatigued mentally, or sometimes, if you're new at it, you might not be executing it in a way that really makes sense to the horse. I mean, if you get bored and you have a friend around you one day, I highly recommend trying to clicker train them to do something, not using any words or anything like that, just clicking every time they do something right and rewarding them. It's harder than you think, and then have them do it back to you, and then you'll have a lot more empathy for your horse. So anyway, my point in saying that is, especially if you start out in the beginning and you notice your horse is walking away from you a lot, don't be too hard on yourself and be like, oh my God, I suck at this, or my horse hates me, or all of those things. Take it as a good sign. Your horse is learning, and it's mentally taxing, and your horse is testing its ability to say no, which is a really good thing, because you want your horses to realize they can say no. If they don't know they can say no, you're still not getting a real yes. So when your horse walks away from you when you first start doing this sort of training, then you're like, hell yeah, they're recognizing it, they got it. And then you can just hang out and, dick around on your phone for a little bit, and then when they come back, you can keep going. And then you start getting real yeses from your horse. Like Zoe, I cannot pry that horse off my side if I tried. She wants to work all the time. If it were up to her, we would be doing stuff all day, every day. She enjoys it so much. And if I had the time, I would be out there. But unfortunately, I have to do things like this. Thanks, guys. You're taking Zoe's time, or my time away from Zoe. Hold on, I have to take a drink. So thirsty. Anyway, so some other perks of being able to work with at Liberty is you don't have to deal with a bunch of shit in your hands. You don't have to worry about whips. You don't have to worry about all the ropes. Lunging can be really difficult. I myself have not figured out how to lunge at Liberty just yet. Working on it. I don't know if I'm going to get there by the time that I start Zoe's kissing spine rehab, which is another thing. I'm going to tangent really fast. A lot of you keep asking me on how I'm doing her rehab. And I think I've said it before recently. I really don't know. I'm working on it and I'm trying to figure out a schedule. I've been really busy the past couple of weeks. And next week I'm leaving to go on a vacation with my family. So I am, like not going to be here. So it's kind of pointless to start. And it's been so hot here in Arkansas. It's miserable outside. And everybody, all of the horses are really like anxious in the mornings before breakfast, so I don't really want to work with her then. So I'm kind of just waiting until it cools off a little bit to get started, and then I really don't want to start conditioning her and trying to get her fit when it's so hot out. I'd rather start when it's a little bit cooler, and then next summer, she'll already be more fit, hopefully, and so then we can keep going instead of trying to start, if that makes sense. So I'm working on the kissing spine issue. I will get there. I'm about to order a book that is on lunging with positive reinforcement that I found on Amazon. I think that it might be helpful. So I'm pretty sure you can just type in clicker training and scroll down. I think it's a Hertha James book. I don't know anything about her. I've never read one of her books, but I'm probably going to order it. I might read it soon. But yeah, so anyway, that said, don't have to coordinate ropes, and you get a true yes, and it's really difficult to get rough. Unless you do some join-up-esque behaviors like, juking the horse out or swinging a whip or a rope or anything like that, directing your energy, being scary, yelling, those sorts of things. But none of those things really actually hurt the horse because, by definition, liberty is kind of like you're not using any equipment. So if you're swinging a whip at them, you're not being at liberty. Take that. But anyway, that said, you still can be rough at liberty. You can be aggressive and hard on the horse, but it's a lot harder than if you have a lead rope. You're a lot more apt to yank on it or shake it, which is obviously painful and not great. So I think liberty takes a step in the right direction. And also, you can't control the horse, so you allow them to make their own decisions as long as, all of the former criteria that I have listed are fulfilled. But I think that just about covers it for, the intro, and now I am going to pull up some questions that you guys asked me on my Instagram story. I asked you guys what sorts of questions you had that were, relevant to liberty training and work of that nature, and of course I got a ton of responses because everybody is just enthralled with liberty, rightfully so. I definitely am and was. But a lot of the questions are going to be, I think, in that realm of how, this question says, how to start it with an older horse. How you start liberty is just taking all of the equipment off the horse. The training is the either positive or negative reinforcement and learning principles, training, that sort of thing. Starting liberty with an older horse is the same as starting it with a younger horse. You just don't have any equipment on it. You have to teach it the basic principles of whichever training method you're going for. I recommend positive reinforcement, especially at liberty, because I think you have a lot higher chance of your horse wanting to work with you using positive reinforcement rather than negative, because I could be totally wrong, but I would say in most cases that you use negative reinforcement, the horse is staying with you because they are afraid of what will happen if they leave. So I think it's better to just stick with positive reinforcement altogether, especially with liberty kind of work. You're not doing really any upper level extreme training or anything like that. So I think it's better to kind of keep it in the positive reinforcement realm. So essentially starting that, I would start in protected contact and start introducing your horses to manners, how you want them to behave around treats, and target training and that sort of thing. And then you'll be pretty much set and safe to go start working with them in their arena or their pasture at liberty. Okay, next question. Do you have any tips on getting a horse to trust you? My biggest tip for building trust with your horse is to create a positive association with yourself. You want to prove to this animal that you are not going to hurt it. You are not going to break its trust by hurting it. And you just kind of have to make a pact with yourself and with that horse that, you're there to do good things that are enjoyable for both of you. And it is really important that you actually pay attention to whether or not whatever activity you're doing is actually enjoyable to your horse, because if it's just enjoyable for you and the horse doesn't really seem to be enjoying it, but he's tolerating it or doing it anyway, I would be wary of trying to spin that so that you can keep doing what you're doing. It's a pretty good indicator if the horse doesn't want to keep doing it if you stop, or if you set them free. If they leave you, it's a pretty good indication that they're not enjoying what's happening. Sorry, I had to drink. How do you train backup? I don't think I've talked about this before. I think, actually, no, that's a lie. I definitely have talked about backing up under saddle. Essentially with Zoe, I taught her to back up by standing next to her shoulder and walking backwards, because she knows how to follow me forwards, and I just did it backwards, and then she leaned backwards and I clicked, and the next time she leaned further backwards and I clicked, and the next time she took a step backwards and I clicked, and the next time she took more steps, and then I just sort of transferred that all around her to where I can stand in front of her and say back and she'll back up, and all of that good stuff. But I touched her first, and then I realized that she generalized that very quickly, and she started backing up every time I would touch her. So I really don't recommend teaching a backup cue tactilely. I recommend a body gesture, like you walking backwards beside them, or a verbal cue like saying back, because the tactile cue, I just don't prefer my horse to back up every time I touch her shoulder. So how do you start training your horse to respond to commands/instructions? Well, commands and instructions are two different things. A command is more, to me, when I hear command, I think canter, and if the horse, say you're lunging, and if the horse doesn't canter, you swing the whip at it. That's a command. There is an or else implied. I prefer in my training to use cues, where I say for the backup situation, I stand in front of Zoe and I say back, and she takes a couple steps backwards, and I click and reward. There is no or else, I guess, unless you count the, implicit negative reinforcement of me not giving her the treat. If, not negative reinforcement, the implicit negative punishment, that if she doesn't take a step back, she doesn't get treats. But there is no painful or anything like that. It could be mildly frustrating, I suppose, but usually they just try harder and then they get it. But how do I start training them to respond to commands and instructions? Well, first, with positive reinforcement, you get the behavior, a fragment of the behavior going. So like I said, with the backup, I started by standing beside her, and then I took a step backwards, and she maybe flicked an ear backwards or leaned like she was about to take a step backwards, and then I clicked and gave her a treat, and then we did it again, and then each time she got a little bit closer and closer, and then she would take a full step, and then maybe 3 steps back, and then I started saying back, and then I would start walking backwards. So that's what we call a new cue, old cue, behavior, click, treat. So she already has the cue of me walking backwards means she needs to walk backwards, and then she'll get a treat. So in order to put that on a vocal cue, I say back, and then that verbal cue becomes a predictor of the me walking backwards old cue, and then so she puts those two together eventually, and then she'll start backing up off of just the word itself, and then I can do it from anywhere around her. The trick is not to say back and then wait until she guesses back. The trick is to say back and then immediately start walking backwards. You just want it to be a predictor, and then maybe you'll say back and hesitate for half a second and then walk backwards. And then you gradually increase that time, but you still want the horse to be successful. You don't want to just throw him to the wolves and be okay, if you don't back up, you don't get a treat. So the goal is obviously to minimize the amount of time that the horse is wrong and the chance at getting inadvertently punished. So, okay. How next question is how no's have looked different in different horses, if applicable. So different no's. I mean, some of them just walk away. Some of them, like Mac, I said earlier, he got a little bit either playful or aggressive. I'll never know. So, I mean, it can either be usually one of those two, or the horse offers a different behavior that it'd rather do, or sometimes they just don't react at all, like maybe backing up is painful, and so they don't want to do that. Another question, do you think that asking repeatedly, like around 3 times, asking the same question in one session affects autonomy? So I think this goes back to what I was talking about having like an overly salient treat. This is another example of that. Like if the horse is repeatedly not responding to the cue, it's either an indication that the horse doesn't understand what you're asking, even if they've done it once before in the past. That doesn't mean they totally get it. You have to have multiple repetitions to know that the horse actually has it. Like, for instance, Dexter, our little baby horse. I had him picking up all 4 of his feet, and then I didn't work with him for a few months because we got Azula, and I love her, and I got a little bit favoritist. And so I've recently started working with him on picking up his feet again, and he forgot. He just doesn't know how to do it anymore. He doesn't know what those cues mean. So just because he's known it before doesn't mean that he knows it now. It's up to me to keep up with the training and be diligent. So if you're finding yourself being like canter, 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 and your horse is not responding, your horse does not know the word. If you're saying back and your horse is not backing up, or they're dancing around, or walking around you, or sniffing your treats, or offering a different behavior, like Zoe, she'll smile sometimes. She'll just lift her upper lip when she doesn't know what I'm asking, and then I reset and I go back to my little internal workshop and ask myself how I can make it clearer for her, because clearly she's not getting it. And it's my responsibility as a trainer to design a lesson plan that she understands. So I normally go into sessions having multiple different ideas on how to train a behavior. So if you are finding yourself asking your horse multiple times repeatedly to do the same thing and you're not getting the result, it's either because the horse physically cannot, simply does not want to, or really does not understand what you're asking, and it is usually the latter. So yes, I think it affects autonomy if there is an or else implied. If the horse doesn't do it after you ask the 3 times, like I think a riding example might be if you are trying to get a horse to walk over a pole and the horse stops in front of the pole and you put your leg on and you squeeze and the horse does not walk forward, and then you squeeze again and the horse doesn't walk forward, and he tries to go around it, and you put him back in front of the pole and you squeeze again and the horse is not going. You're asking over and over again, and the horse either does not want to, is afraid, or can't physically, or doesn't understand what you're asking. You're not giving the horse a choice. He asked to leave and you said no. So yes, that affects autonomy, and also it doesn't really respect the horse as a learner, or a potentially flighty animal. I have to take a drink again. I'm thirsty. I don't know why I'm so thirsty tonight. What misconceptions about it do you hate the most? I hate so many. So I think probably one of the biggest misconceptions about it, well, it's not really a misconception, but the thing that bothers me the most about it probably shouldn't bother me about it, because there's just really not a lot of information out there, so it's not really people's fault. But the fact that they think it is an entire form of training in and of itself, unless you are referring specifically to what Mosey Truitt does in her actual training, because that is a method of training. But Liberty in general is not a method. It's just like a setting, a circumstance, a lack of equipment, and the freedom of the horse to stay or leave. That is not a training method. It might be a component or a setup or an environment, circumstance, whatever you want to call it. That's probably my biggest pet peeve about it. Somebody said I commented on your last YouTube video on some issues, but people always seem to not understand that when I ask questions on my story and I say, ask questions about dominance theory, they're like, how would you work with a horse that is brown. I'm like, what does that have to do with dominance theory? Whatever. I agree with you when it comes to join up, but would you consider it to be liberty or not? I essentially answered that. It depends. If you strictly categorize liberty training as the horse is at liberty to stay or leave based on the fact that it doesn't have equipment on, yes, join up is the horse is at liberty. If you categorize it as the horse has a choice in the circumstance, no, it is not liberty. It's absolutely not liberty because the horse doesn't have a choice. The horse either gets to choose between being chased around and scared for its life or standing next to you for fear of getting scared for its life if it doesn't. That's not a choice. That's not liberty. My pony always stops to graze when I'm working with him or riding him. How do I handle that? Okay, well, I'm not really talking about riding because it's kind of hard to ride at liberty. I mean, I guess you can if you're riding tackless, but I do not think that this question is about that. I think that sometimes grazing is a sign of anxiety. You can usually tell by how quickly the horse is like grabbing at the grass, especially if you're like walking and your horse just dives his nose into the grass and snags a bite. Sometimes that can be an indication of nervousness or anxiety. It's a calming signal the horse is trying to kind of settle down. It can also be a displacement behavior if the horse is uncomfortable by something, like you put him in a new pasture and he just starts like munching on grass like aggressively. That can be a sign of that. At new shows, like if you take your horse to a show or a new barn and they're just like dragging you around eating grass, it's usually because they're trying to calm themselves down and not look threatening to any other horses. And sometimes, like especially maybe ponies, they're deprived of food. Some ponies I know are on a dry lot because they have a tendency to founder, and they are hungry all the time, or because they don't like what they're doing. There are a few different reasons for that. I think Hippo Logic, she has a website, Hippo, Hippo Logic, does a seminar on it that you might look into. I have not done it. Next question says, transitions with positive reinforcement, mark and have them stop to give the reward right away or wait a few paces. What? Oh, yeah, okay, I see. So not really a question about liberty, but I will answer it anyway. I usually mark immediately and then gradually start building duration. Every time I teach a new behavior or start working on something that I am reinforcing via positive reinforcement, I start with the smallest increment and work up from there. I don't ask my horse to canter and then canter 10 strides and then click. I'm training the transition, so I'm going to mark the transition. And that means you have to stop afterwards and then give the horse a treat. But the difference is your horse is going to have done that transition 20 times, whereas, Sally on the other side of the arena has only done it once because she's still cantering in the amount of time that you've done all those transitions. So which horse is going to be better at transitions? Yours. Does positive reinforcement work the same or similarly for dogs as it does with horses? Yes, absolutely. I'm pretty sure all species, including fish, humans, dogs, cats, horses, reptiles, all learn through operant conditioning. How to train with positive reinforcement and not get upset when they get a little nippy. To me, I would say you need to step out of the stall or arena that you're working in and stay in protected contact, because if you are in a space where you can't just step away and the horse can't follow you, you run the risk of having to reprimand your horse, and that's not what we want to do. So until you get that under control, I would recommend staying outside the fence or outside the stall while you work on this, and just teaching your horse manners. And I call them manners anthropomorphically. Really, you're just rewarding the horse for the behavior that you want to see. If your horse is being nippy, do not give him the treat while he's nipping for it. Only reward the horse out of your space and when their head is away from you. So I have several videos, I think, on my YouTube where I demonstrate that. I have an entire blog post about that on JETEquiTheory.com /help. It would be in the positive reinforcement help tab. But I talk all about that on those. I also have several different episodes on biting. I would not get frustrated at it, but take it as a training challenge instead, because it's really not hard to fix nipping. You really just have to teach the horse that the way to get treats is to just be out of your space. And by definition, the horse cannot both be out of your space to get a reward and nipping you at the same time. So you teach that incompatible behavior to hopefully help the horse get what he wants, and then he dissolves the nipping behavior as a result. But also, there are other potential causes of nipping that could be frustration if you're waiting too long in between clicks, or you're asking too much at once, and the horse is like, get on with it already. You're supposed to reward me. So it depends. I would have to watch you train to know that for sure. So somebody else asks, not a question, but please explain to people that liberty trained with negative reinforcement does not equal autonomy. So I tend to agree. Because as I said earlier, negative reinforcement tends to, it's not negative reinforcement, it's traditional training that tends to come with an or else. Because if you're working at liberty with your horse and you have say a dressage whip, and you're out in the field and you're sending the horse around you with a dressage whip, if the horse stops going around you, usually there's some sort of like chasing or whipping or something that makes the horse continue, because he knows if he doesn't, he's going to face a reprimand. And also, negative reinforcement tends to not work well with liberty, because by definition you have to apply an aversive. So again, if we're not clear, negative reinforcement is the removal of something unpleasant in order to increase behavior. Negative means removal, reinforcement means increased behavior. So say you're riding and you want the horse to go faster. So you put your leg on, which this is where the quadrants get kind of messy, because technically that could be positive punishment. You're punishing the horse for walking when you want it to trot. It's very messy, and that's why I try to avoid thinking, one quadrant at a time, which I used to, and that makes my brain hurt, so I don't do that anymore. But you apply your leg and you ask the horse to move forward. But is it really an ask? Because in most circumstances, if the horse doesn't move forward, what do? You apply more leg or a whip or a spur, and you say, horse, go forward, or else things are going to get worse. And that is where I have an issue with negative reinforcement. We've talked about this 1,000 times. I don't really like escalating negative reinforcement because there's an or else. The horse doesn't have a choice. It says, horse, if you don't go faster, I'm going to kick you harder. I'm going to hit you with a whip. I'm going to hit you with my spur. I'm going to lift my leg off your side and kick you. Go forward. And so the reason that the horse goes forward is because he is trying to get you to, 1, stop kicking him, and 2, take off that pressure from your leg. So he's trying to get you to remove the stimulus that he doesn't like, i.e. the pressure on his sides and the pain from kicking, per se. It depends on, obviously, how hard you kick. But so that's where negative reinforcement and liberty don't really jive well together, because if it is working, the horse is probably doing it because he doesn't have a choice. Therefore, it's not autonomous. Therefore, the horse doesn't have a choice. Therefore, it's not liberty by my definition. And also, why would the horse stay if he had a choice, a genuine choice to leave, if all you're doing is removing things he doesn't like to get him to keep doing what you want? I don't know if that makes any sense, but I tend to agree that negative reinforcement is really hard to use autonomy with if you especially use escalating negative reinforcement. Oh, more water. Okay. What do I do if I feel stuck in my training? You guys are not asking questions that is relevant to liberty. I said verbatim, questions you guys have about liberty training, etc. And that is not what I got. But I'll answer it. if you feel stuck in your training, I would say change it up. Do something else. If you are an event rider, try doing positive reinforcement groundwork. Do something else. Go on a trail ride. Though sometimes that does not go well, because if your horse is strictly an arena horse, while you may think it will be nice and peaceful to go on a trail ride, your horse will be very overwhelmed. Some horses. I used to wonder why. I was like, I'm taking Zoe on this nice, relaxing trail ride, and she's being a brat on the way back. She's rearing and cantering in place. Well, that's because I thought it was a nice, relaxing trail ride. She did not. I did not consider her perception one bit at all. And therefore, I got a horse that was very anxious and stressed and overwhelmed, really wanted to get back with her buddies, and was terrified because she was alone very far away from home. So, yes, learned my lesson with that one. Thank you, Adele, for teaching me that, the willing equine. So I would say if you feel stuck in your training, change it up within reason. So do something else. Take the pressure off. If you feel like you're not getting anywhere in your training, just go out and enjoy your horse and relax, or maybe take a week off. Or maybe sit down and write out some goals that you have and some behaviors you would like to train, and then break them down piece by piece and do that sort of thing. Or maybe you could take some time off and spend that time learning. So like for me, I really want to learn how to do Zoe's feet myself. So whenever I catch a break, I'm going to take some time and read a book that I have on it, and start watching some videos and some tutorials and that sort of thing. I spend a lot of time with our farrier asking questions and having him show me what he's doing. So I've been slowly learning, but I'd really like to be able to get to where I feel comfortable being able to do it myself. And so, yeah, I mean, sometimes it can be really fun to learn something new and doing your own research, and then you feel really confident when you go into doing those things. Because sometimes, like, especially if you try positive reinforcement without doing any research, you're going to be like, this shit doesn't work, or I'm terrible at it, I don't want to do it anymore. So set yourself up for success. Make sure you're going into it with some knowledge and a fresh mind. If you're having some really difficult circumstances in your personal life and you're really stressed out, I would not recommend trying to train also, because you're probably just going to end up stressed out with your horse. So unless that is a way that you de-stress, obviously everybody's different. So maybe some of those recommendations help. You guys, these are not questions about Liberty. How do you get your horse to leave you and go in the lunge circle? Girl, if I knew. Because, I mean, I don't want to, like, punish Zoe and, like, shoo her away. I tell you, I want to know how Indo the Blind Morgan taught all of those things. Because Morgan, the girl that owns Indo, that's his Instagram name, by the way, is Indo the Blind, and her name is Morgan, so it's Indo the Blind Morgan, but he's not actually a Morgan. She has, like, a sound that sends him, like, he knows to move out on the circle, a sound to move closer to her, a sound to go faster, and to slow down, and to come, and I think that's so cool. I have no idea how she trained it, and it could be not a way that I would like to train, but I have a really hard time seeing that, but didn't mean to make a sided joke, sorry about that. But yeah, so I don't know, that is not something that I've been able to achieve. I also know my buddy Meyer Horsemanship, Kane, they did a super job with their mare Lily. So I don't know, haven't figured that out yet. How to reward when the horses get aggressive / greedy towards treats. Again, if you guys listened to the last episode, you know I don't prefer those words when you say horses are pushy or aggressive or muggy or things like that. It implies that there's some intent behind it, but really they're just doing what's natural to horses. Look at the way they find food naturally. They rub their noses all over the ground until they find the grass that they want. That's what they're doing to you. Unless you teach them something else, they're only going to do what's in their repertoire. It is not already in their repertoire to move their head away from you to look for food. That doesn't make any sense to them. So you have to teach it. So if the horse is being all over you and in your space, you have to reward them for being out of your space. Again, I have a video up on my YouTube channel called How to Start Clicker Training with Positive Reinforcement. And even if you don't want to do that, it is how to teach a horse to not mug. And I should probably just go ahead and film a video called How to Teach Your Horse Not to Mug You or Bite Around Treats. I will put that on my list. Okay. How to create an environment where your horse wants to work with you. I would recommend doing things that your horse enjoys. Perhaps positive reinforcement, where he gets nice treats for doing things that you both enjoy doing. Making sure that there is nothing around that is potentially scary or frightening or overwhelming for him, going at his pace, respecting when he says, no, I don't want to do that, or no, I'm not comfortable with that. And the thing is, like, no, I don't want to do that is not an end of the road. You have to, as a trainer, figure out, how can I make this more enjoyable for the horse, you know? I mean, and obviously, again, I always have to say, I am not talking about emergency situations or when the vet comes and you have to get your horse out and you have to pull them and force them or whatever. The goal of training is to prep for situations like that, so you don't have to do all those things that you don't like to do. But, you know, not everybody's perfect. I'm definitely not. I'm not all the way there yet. But you have to prep and you have to train your horse, and you have to make the things that you do at their pace. You have to respect them as a learner, and you have to really, really avoid trying to force it happening and to, control the horse, which is so difficult for us. But the horse is a sign of freedom, and for some reason that means that we just want to oppress them and make them do everything we want and bend to our will, and that is not the way it goes. So, listener, I'm not telling you that you have been rude or mean to your horse by any definition. I am just saying that you have to consider those things and make sure that you're not doing them, even if inadvertently, that is okay, but make sure that you're not. And yeah, I think that's about all I got on that one. What is the first thing you should teach any animal while doing these? I'm assuming you're talking about liberty. I would say, especially if you're working with food, I would say how to teach the horse how to receive food. Not how to not be muggy, not how to not bite, not how to all of those things that you don't want them to do. This is a phenomenon that keeps coming up for me in my life recently. It is, I don't know if you guys know this or not. I'm going on a tangent. Fair warning. If you only ever concentrate on the things that you do not want in life, that's all you're going to think about, okay? Here's a thought exercise, everyone. Are you ready for this experiment? Do not think of a pink elephant. What have you only thought about? Unless you have, oh God, I forgot what the word is for aphantasia. I think that's when you don't have a mind's eye. You thought of a pink elephant. So if you think, I don't want this behavior, I don't want to be ugly, I don't want to be angry, I don't want that type of person, I don't want blah, 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 that's all you're going to see around you, because your brain cannot think in negatives. You cannot process not a pink elephant. You only see a pink elephant in your mind's eye unless you have aphantasia. So if you're only thinking about, like, have you ever met somebody, or like this happens to me with boyfriends or people I date. Every time I date them, I see their car everywhere, and I always think it's them because it's at the front of my awareness. I'm always thinking about that type of car when I'm on the road, and because I'm thinking about them and I'm looking for them, not actively, but it happens. And so if you are just only focusing on what is wrong, what your horse is not doing, blah, 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 you tend to get more, or you only see more of that. Think about in traditional training, how often do you reward your horse for walking next to you the way you want it to? Hardly ever. How often do you correct your horse when he dives for a bite of grass? A lot. In negative reinforcement and traditional training, it is largely centered around what you don't want. And that's what I really love about positive reinforcement, because I tend to be a natural cynic. I tend to be pessimistic. I tend to have a really honed in focus on the negative and things that I don't like. And that is why I love positive reinforcement, because it forces me to look for things that I do want. It forces me to constantly be on guard for the horse acting the way that I want it to, or taking a step in the right direction, and then I reward for that. And you know which type of training I find myself smiling and laughing the most often in is positive reinforcement, because I'm focusing on the good in my training and not the things that I don't like. So I think that it is super, super important to not focus so hard on the things that you don't want your horse to do. Focus on what you do want him to do, and naturally the behaviors that you don't like, unless something is wrong, are going to fade out. Like if you are girthing up your horse, and this is a bad example, but I'm going to go ahead with it. If you're girthing up your horse and you reward him for standing still and not wiggling, then the horse is going to learn that you want him to stand still and he's going to get treats that way. But obviously you don't want to really do it in that circumstance because the horse is going to be, pinning his ears, probably because he has ulcers. But maybe like in a circumstance where the horse is, if you haven't really worked with the horse on how you would like it to handle food rewards and, oh, sorry, I just got a message and my phone distracted me. So if you haven't worked on your horse how you would like him to behave around food rewards, and you walk up to him with treats and he starts sniffing you and nosing around in your hands or in your pockets for treats, and you just stand there, the horses, some horses will get frustrated and they'll bite you or get aggressive or mug even harder, or start pawing. Those are all behaviors you don't want. So maybe you want to set the horse up for success and reward him when he's out of your space. And positive reinforcement works really well with this because sometimes, because I like to start with the target. And sometimes the horse just gets distracted and looks the other way, and then I'll click and treat. And it just makes things so much more efficient because they get a little bit tired of doing whatever they're doing, and then they look at something off in the distance, and then you click and they're like, oh, and then you've accidentally or they've accidentally stumbled on the right behavior. And that's what you want. Whether it was intentional or accidental, you want them to always be right. And I think it's just the most important part of training. Think about it. If you're a student and you're in class, like this used to bother me, and it's why I moved from one of my riding trainers growing up. Every time I rode past her and she didn't say anything, I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, I must be doing it right. Because I could feel her scrutinizing gaze staring at me. And I was like, oh God, it's coming. And then she never said anything. And I was like, oh, okay, cool, I'm doing it right. That's not a reward. That's a relief. And that is negative reinforcement. I'm anticipating something coming, and I'm feeling the pressure, and then she takes her eyes off of me and she moves away and she doesn't say the thing that I'm anticipating her saying. So then I'm like, okay, cool, I'm relieved. And then I switched to a trainer who always said, yes, that's awesome, you guys look great, could you tweak this? Great, that looks perfect, even better. Which trainer do you want to ride under? The one that always tells you you're doing something wrong and never tells you what you're doing right? The only way that you know what you're doing right is when they're not bothering you, when they're not telling you anything. That is not the trainer you want to ride under, and neither should you expect your horse to want to work with you. So if you're setting your horse up for success, you should really be trying to focus on what they're doing right and rewarding them in a way that they like. Patting them on the shoulder, after you see those Grand Prix jumpers or eventers coming off their Rolex ride and they're just slapping the dog shit out of the horse's neck. That does not feel good. It just doesn't. Do it to yourself. Just because it's a horse doesn't make it feel good. If you did that to a dog, you would call it dog abuse. It doesn't feel good. They much prefer scratches. You don't see horses out in the field slapping each other. They they groom each other with their teeth, and it feels much better. And newsflash, your fingers are much better at doing that than their teeth are, and it feels really good. So for most horses, some horses actually don't even like that. So then you just stick with treats. So, yeah. Best ways to do positive reinforcement / liberty work at a barn without a round pen. Don't use a round pen at all. Do a paddock. Or you could even do it in a stall, but you can't do any, obviously, big, fast movements. You could use an arena anywhere. The goal is not to limit the horse on how far he can go away from you. The goal is to make the horse want to stay with you. Okay, so I'm reading the rest of the questions and they're not really relevant. So I'm gonna save them for another episode, or maybe when I do an episode where I ask you guys to ask me questions, then I will get to that. Maybe I'll take notes on some of them for topics, but for now we're talking about liberty, not other things. But I will answer this last one that says, could you do a collab with Shelby Dennis and talk about dominance theory and equine welfare? And I want to say that is in the works. Shelby and I have been talking about doing an episode today, actually, which is really odd that I got that question as well, because nobody's ever asked us to collab before on my end. But she messaged me and she was like, hey, people are asking us to collab. Do you want to? And I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. Actually, that's nearly exactly what I said. And so I think we're going to try to do some welfare and behavior perception-esque episodes, and I'm really excited. She's threw out some really awesome ideas, so hopefully it'll be good. I've just got to figure out how to do that. I know on Anchor you can have people in, but I don't know if we could, like, I don't even know if she has a mic that she uses, but that way we could have some better sound quality, because if I have to hold the phone next to the mic, I don't know how well that's going to go. But I'll test some things out and see what I think. But anyway, thank you guys so much for listening. I think that is about it. I hope I cleared up some of the misconceptions around Liberty Training and what it is, and helped you understand it a little bit better, and maybe inspired you to give it a shot. So thank you guys so much for listening. Be sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at JETEquiTheory. Also keep up with the podcast on Instagram and Facebook at JetRealPodcast. Be sure to support us on Patreon if you're feeling like you can. That is JetReal Podcast. You can just search it in the Patreon app or on the website. I do monthly live Q&As. So be sure to join that. I always recommend joining the Patreon at the first of the month, because if you join on the 26th of a month, you'll have to pay again at the first of the next month. I don't know why they set it up like that. It really should just be if you pay on the 26th, that's the day that you pay every month. But that's not how they work, so I recommend signing up on the 1st. This past month, I did the Q&A on the 17th, so you are not behind. So if you would do that. I also can answer your training questions and all that good stuff. But yeah, I think that about covers it. I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode and the 2 dominance theory episodes, the little bonus episode. It made my heart so happy. But yeah, I think without further ado, I don't know why I always try to say that at the end of the episode. With that said, that is the ending one. With that said, I will see you guys next Tuesday. Thank you so much.